Man, this is one that Indy's really going to want to have back. Props to the Thunder for staying tough throughout, not getting overly rattled by being down for so much of the game. And of course, props to SGA and Jalen Williams for an efficient 62 points together. SGA super clutch down the stretch, had so many nice offensive plays, was consistently good on defense as he always is. Same for Jalen Williams, more so on the defensive side than him being clutch down the stretch, but that's because SGA was making basically all of the shots and left none for Williams. This really does illustrate the difference in the two teams where OKC can win when they're not at their best. And, that's a testament to the discrepancy in talent for these teams. OKC, 18% from three. That is so bad. Indy was about 30%. So, not great, but much better than what OKC was. They had only 10 assists. They had less than half what Indy had. Indy had 21 assists. So much against OKC, but they stayed true to themselves. They kept playing good defense, making things super hard on Indy, and offensively too. Having a superstar MVP caliber player like SGA, that means a lot when you're going against a good defense like Indy. Even when they're playing good defense, SGA can create, and he made the good defense look not so good a lot of the time as well. So this really was a testament to the difference in teams. This feels like this is kind of a backbreaker of a game. You don't want to overreact too much to one game, but going up 3-1 if you're Indy, that's almost a guarantee that you win the series. It's not foolproof, but you can stumble into a game in the next three where, maybe OKC shoots dreadfully from three again and you just shoot well. Then you win it. Based on that, you can close out the series. 2-2, that's really tough against this OKC team. I'm not saying Indy is incapable, but 3-1, you feel like you got, you know, everything going your way pretty much. 2-2, it's really going to come down to who's the better team down the stretch. And, everybody thought OKC was the better team going into this. I didn't like a lot from Miles Turner today. He defensively was really frustrating because he's such a good rim protector, but he was not always involved in that, especially early on in the game. So maybe it doesn't count quite as much, but the lead could have been even bigger had he not been so involved in the full court pressure. When players got past him, there was simply no rim protection, and that happened quite a bit early on in the game, especially where Turner would get beat. There'd be no extra line of defense because he was far and away the best shot blocker for Indy. So, I didn't really like him being involved in the full court pressure. Turner and Neesmith combined for 5 of 19 from the field. That is brutal. If you make a couple more, you can win this game. There was a lot like that for the Pacers. Who knows how the game plays out if the Toppin call is, not, in my opinion, pretty dreadful. I think Toppin pretty clearly went for the ball. I don't think Caruso was in much of a vulnerable position. I thought it was pretty clearly a bad call. I also kind of thought Turner's foul right after was pretty weak as well on Wiggins. Who knows how the game plays out if that doesn't transpire. Obviously, the score wasn't close enough to where those calls are the only deciding factor, and rarely is one call the deciding factor anyways. But the game looks a little bit different if those calls are different. So I thought that was pretty rough for Indy. The thing that was so rough for Indy too was them in the clutch. Matherin missing 3 free throws down the stretch, 2 out of play fouls where the ball wasn't even inbounded. So Shea got 2 free throws. That, of course, he cashed in on. That was really bad. And Halliburton and Nemhart combined just were not it tonight. Halliburton and Nemhart combined for 9 assists and 9 turnovers. That is so bad, especially for two guys that are good at protecting the ball. They need to be so much better than that. It was kind of crazy they were even close with that being the ratio for them. Halliburton was not great. He scored at about the level you want him to, but he's got to protect the ball better than he did. Also, down the stretch, this again isn't the make or break necessarily, but it was a bad look that he had Holmgren dancing and he couldn't cash in late in the game. Who knows how things play out if they have some more pressure on OKC if Halliburton makes that shot down the stretch. Lots of things went wrong for Indy, and OKC ended up capitalizing on it. Of course, lots went wrong for OKC as well. And one thing that didn't go wrong for Indy was Siakam defensively. He had an all right offensive game, but defensively was just on a whole different planet. 4 steals in the first quarter. That is remarkable. He was an absolute nuisance. So that was one great bright spot for the Pacers. Another thing that was kind of a bright spot for them, weirdly enough, was Isaiah Hartenstein's defense. He kept leaving Spicy P open from 3, which I don't think the Thunder are too reluctant to do because he's a little bit of an inconsistent shooter. And, you got to give some concession to the Pacers offense at the end of the day. So that's not ideal, though, to be continually leaving somebody wide open from 3 that can make the shot. He matches the physicality, of course, of Siakam, but he just can't keep up. So, he's either leaving open a 3 or getting the contest, and then Hardenstein's not fast enough to keep up with Siakam. So there really are some issues with Hartenstein being out there, and I don't think it's a guarantee that he's a big factor moving forward because this just isn't the greatest series for his skill set. So that's something Indy can feel good about. The last thing that Indy can feel good about, obviously, these are just moral victories. You got to feel better if you're OKC. You actually get the win. But OKC's defense continues to be very intense, but a bit problematic in the same light. It's kind of a dual edged sword, as basically anytime Siakam, Halliburton, even TJ McConnell get any sort of penetration, there's intense help. And that, of course, makes things really difficult for any sort of driving scoring. But it continually led to scrambles for the Thunder's defense where they are kind of willing to concede the 3 if it means protecting against the paint. And, it has worked for them, but I don't think that's something that's a guarantee to work for them moving forward because Indy can very much make you pay from 3. And if nothing else, they were making them pay a good bit on drives after the initial drive where the defense is scrambling, so they get a late closeout where they're just full on sprinting to the shooter, not super disciplined. And that's how the Pacers were getting a lot of their offense too. I don't think the Thunder need to be as intense as they are on defense. It's weird to say that, for a historically great defense like the Thunder, hey, do something different. They've done it all season. It's worked for them. But I do think they kind of benefit the Pacers a little bit in that regard, with them being so reluctant to allow anything in the paint. I think sometimes that benefits the Pacers because it makes it where they're not just playing 1-versus-1 offense, which, usually that's a great thing for the offense to just be 1-on-1. But when you got Dort making things so difficult for Halliburton continually giving the ball up and, trying to reroute, and then it just ends up being Nemhart against whoever he can go against. A lot of times it's, Caruso, though. So you're getting your two best players, or the two lead ball handlers, I should say, being guarded by just complete menaces on defense. I think that's a better defense for the Thunder than going into scrambles. Granted, it hasn't been a full on issue for them, but I do think that benefits the Pacers and it benefits their style a bit as well by making things more chaotic, which the Pacers tend to live on chaos. They did turn the ball over a lot, though, in this game, so it is hard to say. This was a very weird game, as you could probably tell. There's lots of things to feel good about for both sides. There's lots of things where you're like, we cannot do that moving forward. It'll be interesting to see how this series plays out. It's gone so drastically different than what most would have thought going in the first place. Now there's lots of moral victories, moral losses, actual victories, actual losses at hand. It's very weird. So those are my thoughts on Game 4 of the NBA Finals. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section. And also be sure to like and subscribe for more basketball and football content.